My name is Sophie, I'm 32, and my husband laughed while signing our divorce papers. Before I tell you what happened when the judge read my real net worth, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The courtroom was freezing. Or maybe that was just me. The polished wood of the table felt like a block of ice under my clammy hands. Across from me, my soon-to-be ex-husband, Nathan, was anything but cold. He was practically glowing with smug satisfaction. He'd lean over to his lawyer, a man with a shark smile and a suit to match, whisper something, and then let out a short, controlled laugh. It wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a laugh of victory. A punctuation mark on the end of my 10-year marriage. He caught me looking and his lips twisted into a smirk. It was a look I had become intimately familiar with over the past few years, a potent mix of pity and superiority that made my stomach turn. It was the look of a man who believed he had won, decisively. It said, "Poor, little Sophie. What will you ever do without me?" I tore my eyes away and focused on the American flag standing tall beside the judge's bench. My own lawyer, Mr. Davies, a quiet, methodical man who radiated a grandfatherly calm, had given me one instruction that morning. Do not let him see you sweat, Sophie. Your composure is your weapon. So I focused on the flag, on the slow tick of the clock on the wall, on anything but the man who was currently dismantling my life with a smile. Nathan's lawyer was on his feet, his voice droning on as he outlined the terms of their more than generous settlement. The words were coded in legal jargon, but the message was simple: they were giving me scraps. Just enough to rent a small apartment and transition into a new life, as if I were a piece of software being updated. The entire speech was crafted to paint Nathan as a benevolent king casting off his favored courtier with a small bag of gold for her troubles. The humiliation was a physical thing, a heavy cloak settling over my shoulders. I didn't move a muscle. I just waited for the hum of the air conditioning to stop, for the shark to sit down, for the silence to return. Finally, it was our turn. Mr. Davies rose, not with a burst of energy, but with the slow, deliberate gravity of an oak tree. He didn't counter their offer. He didn't list my grievances. He simply addressed the judge, his voice even and clear, cutting through the thick tension. Your Honor, he said, we find the proposed terms of asset division acceptable. However, we have just this morning filed an amended and updated financial disclosure for my client. He placed a hand on a thick, spiral-bound document on our table. It was at least 3 inches thick. A copy was already being handed to Nathan's lawyer by a court bailiff. Nathan's smirk faltered. Just for a second. His brow furrowed in confusion. He couldn't comprehend what I could possibly have to disclose. In his mind, my financial identity was a satellite of his own, there were no new continents to discover. As I watched his lawyer flip open the first page, his confident posture beginning to stiffen, my mind slipped its leash. The cold courtroom dissolved, and suddenly, I was standing in the cluttered, chaotic space that had been the first office of Horizon Tech. It wasn't an office, really. It was a garage we rented from a grumpy old man, and it perpetually smelled of oil and damp concrete. We had one desk, 2 folding chairs, and a whiteboard covered in what looked like the frantic scribblings of a madman. That whiteboard was my domain. Nathan was the coder, the technical genius. But I was the one who saw the bigger picture. I was the one who figured out how people would actually use the brilliant, complicated thing he was building. I remember the day of our first breakthrough. Nathan had hit a wall. He had a powerful piece of software, but no clear application for it. He was frustrated, ready to give up. It's too complex, Soph, he'd said, slumping into a chair, his face pale with exhaustion. No one will get it. I had been up for 2 nights straight, researching competitors, reading user forums, trying to find a gap in the market. I grabbed a marker and went to the whiteboard. You're thinking like an engineer, I told him, my voice buzzing with an idea. Stop trying to sell the engine. We need to build a car around it. Look here. I started drawing. I mapped out a user interface, a subscription model, a tiered feature set aimed at small businesses, not massive corporations. I laid out a whole marketing strategy on that board. It was my idea. My vision for how his code could become a business. He watched me, his eyes getting wider and wider. When I was done, he just stared at the board for a full minute. Then he looked at me, his eyes shining with an awe I hadn't seen since our first date. "Sophie," he'd whispered. "You're a genius." A year later, when we accepted our first round of venture capital funding, he stood in a real boardroom, in front of men in expensive suits, and presented that exact strategy. My whiteboard drawings had been turned into a slick PowerPoint presentation. He never once mentioned my name. When an investor asked him how he came up with such a brilliant marketing angle, Nathan had smiled his charming smile and said, "It came to me one night." Sometimes, the best ideas just demand to be born. I was sitting in the back of the room. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. But I smiled. I clapped. I told myself it was for us. For our future. I buried my own ambitions deeper and deeper, telling myself his success was my success. I handled the HR, the accounting, the administrative nightmares. I decorated our new, bigger offices. I planned the company parties. I was the ghost in the machine, the invisible foundation upon which his throne was built. And the higher his throne rose, the smaller I became. The man who once saw me as a genius now saw me as an accessory. The dinner parties were the worst part. He'd hold court, regaling his tech bro disciples with tales of his conquests in the corporate world. I was expected to be the perfect hostess, smiling and silent. If anyone made the mistake of asking about my own interests, he'd cut in before I could speak. "Oh, Sophie's a wonderfully creative spirit," he'd say, with a paternal pat on my arm. "She has her little hobbies. Keeps her busy." The little hobbies he referred to were my designs. My lifeline. The sketches I'd started doing again in secret, late at night after he'd fallen asleep, the only thing that was truly mine. Each condescending comment, each casual dismissal, was another log on a fire that was starting to burn inside me. The final, catastrophic explosion was ignited by a quiet phone call. I was bringing in groceries, and I heard him in his home office, the door slightly ajar. He was talking to a major investor, a man whose name was always spoken in hushed, reverent tones. "And what about your wife?" the investor asked. "What's her role in all this?" I froze, my fingers tight around the handles of the paper bags. I held my breath, waiting for him to say something, anything, that acknowledged my decade of work. I heard Nathan give a light, dismissive chuckle. "Sophie? Oh, she's fantastic. My rock. My biggest supporter. You know how it is. She keeps the home fires burning, handles all the little things so I can focus on the big picture. She's just around. Just around." The grocery bag slipped from my fingers. A carton of eggs shattered on the hardwood floor. But I didn't hear it. The only sound was those two words, echoing in the sudden, vast emptiness inside me. It was the crack of a dam breaking. A decade of swallowed frustrations, of silent sacrifices, of bitten-back words, came rushing forth in a silent, tidal wave of rage. I didn't confront him. What was the point? He wouldn't even understand what he'd done wrong. Instead, that night, after he was asleep, I made another phone call. To Clara. My best friend from design school, now a moderately successful textile agent in New York. She was the only person on earth who knew what I had given up. He called me an accessory, Clara, I whispered into the phone, huddled in the walk-in closet so he wouldn't hear me. He said I was just around. Clara was silent for a moment. I could hear the city traffic in the background of her apartment. "Okay," she said finally, her voice all business. "So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to keep being a ghost in your own house, or are you going to start haunting him?" Her words were a splash of cold water. What do you mean? I mean, you're the most talented designer I've ever known, Sophie. You have an eye that people would kill for. He thinks your dream is a little hobby? Show him what a little hobby can do. A new kind of energy started to fizz through my veins. It wasn't hope. It was something harder, sharper. It was resolve. The next day, my new life began. I used my personal savings to rent a tiny, windowless studio in a rundown building in the Arts District. To Nathan, I said I was taking a pottery class. "That's nice, honey," he'd said, not even looking up from his phone. His disinterest was my camouflage. That tiny room became my sanctuary and my factory. I called it SVN Studio. My initials. The first piece of me I'd claimed back. For 18 months, I lived a life of meticulously planned deception. I was the smiling, supportive wife until 9 p.m. Then, I'd slip out to my studio and work until the sun came up. I was a phantom, moving through the city while it slept. It was brutal. I made mistakes. I ordered 100 yards of silk from a supplier in India that turned out to be cheap polyester. I had to eat the cost, a loss that felt catastrophic at the time. I spent weeks trying to code my own e-commerce website, nearly throwing my laptop out the window before finally breaking down and hiring a professional. There was a close call when an invoice for a shipment of French lace was accidentally mailed to our penthouse. I saw it in the mail pile and my heart stopped. I managed to snatch it just moments before Nathan came in, my hands shaking so badly I could barely open it. But there were victories, too. Clara became my long-distance business partner, connecting me with suppliers and giving me brutally honest feedback. "The cut of that blazer is genius, Soph, but the fabric looks cheap. It cheapens the whole design. Find something better." She pushed me. Then came the first sale to a total stranger. I was asleep at my studio desk when my phone buzzed with an order confirmation. Someone in Ohio had bought one of my dresses. I stared at the screen, and for the first time in years, I cried tears of pure joy. Slowly, organically, things started to build. A fashion blogger found my site. She bought a dress, wore it, and posted it. The post got 1,000 likes. Then 10,000. My little website crashed. The orders poured in. I was no longer just a designer, I was a CEO. I was managing inventory, marketing, customer service. I was exhausted, terrified, and more alive than I had ever been. And Nathan noticed nothing. He was too consumed by his own world, his own success, his own reflection. The final betrayal, the one that torched the last bridge between us, happened on a rainy Wednesday. It was our 11th anniversary. I know. Foolish. But a small, stupid part of me thought I should make an effort. I bought his favorite pastries and went to his office to surprise him. The surprise was on me. As I stepped out of the elevator, I saw him standing near the reception desk. He was with a woman. Young, blonde, and visibly pregnant. His hand was resting on the small of her back. They were laughing. It was an easy, intimate laugh. The kind we used to have. He saw me. The laughter died in his throat. The color drained from his face. The woman looked at me, then back at him, her smile fading into confusion. "Nathan? Who's this?" I braced myself for the lie. Maybe he'd say I was his sister. A cousin. What he said was so much worse. So much more cruel. He gave the woman's back a reassuring rub and looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "It's fine, babe," he said to her, his voice a smooth, confident lie. "This is Sophie. She's an old acquaintance. Her husband left her recently. I'm just trying to help her find a job." He had not only replaced me, not only erased our marriage. He had rewritten my entire reality into a pathetic sob story where he was the hero, and I was the charity case. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe. I looked at him, at the woman, at his hand on her back. And I felt a profound and terrifying calm descend over me. It was the calm at the center of a hurricane. I turned around, walked back to the elevator, and pressed the down button. The ride felt like an eternity. When the doors opened to the lobby, I walked out, hailed a cab, and said 2 words to the driver. Lawyer's office. The months of legal prep were a strange dance. Nathan's team was aggressive, trying to paint me as a bitter, spurned wife looking for an undeserved payday. Our side was quiet, compliant. We agreed to almost everything. All the while, the secret of SVN Studio was a ticking time bomb in my briefcase. The day before the final hearing, the game changed. A formal, written offer arrived via courier from one of the largest, most prestigious fashion houses in Paris. They had been watching SVN Studio for months. They wanted to acquire it. The number they offered was so large, so absurd, that I laughed when I first saw it. It wasn't a number for a little hobby. It was a number for an empire. Mr. Davies was practically vibrating with excitement. This is it, Sophie. This is the cannon we use to sink his battleship. We can countersue for emotional distress, intellectual property theft from your early ideas, we can take everything. I looked at the offer. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. The look on Nathan's face. The total victory. The revenge. But the thought left a sour taste in my mouth. No, I said, surprising even myself. I don't want to be the woman who destroyed his company. I want to be the woman who built her own. We stick to the plan. I don't want a penny more than what they're offering. I just want the truth to be on the record. Mr. Davies looked at me, a long, searching look. Then he nodded slowly. All right, Sophie. The truth it is. The night before the court date, I went back to my first studio, the tiny, windowless room. I was moving to a bigger space next month, but I needed to be here one last time. I stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by my early, clumsy designs, my first sewing machine. I touched the wall where I had pinned that first order from the woman in Ohio. This was my history. This was the place where Sophie Vance, the ghost, had died, and Sophie Vance, the CO, had been born. I was ready. Which brought me back here. To this frigid courtroom. To the moment of truth. The bailiff handed the thick document to Nathan's lawyer. I watched him. He flipped through the first few pages, incorporation documents, tax IDs, with a bored expression. Then he stopped. His eyes narrowed. He turned a page. And then another. I saw his knuckles go white where he gripped the document. He looked up at Mr. Davies, his mouth slightly open, a look of utter disbelief on his face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. In a way, he had. He leaned over and shoved the document in front of Nathan, whispering frantically. I couldn't hear what he said, but I didn't need to. I just watched Nathan. My husband. The man who thought my world was the size of his shadow. I watched him scan the first page. A frown. He turned the page. The frown deepened. He started flipping faster, his movements becoming jerky, frantic. He was seeing the sales reports, the growth charts, the profit and loss statements. He was seeing 18 months of my secret life laid out in black and white. And then he reached the last page. It was a copy of the acquisition offer from the Parisian fashion house. The number, $25 million, was circled in red by Mr. Davies' pen. Nathan's body went rigid. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly, waxy pallor. His jaw, which had been set in a smug line all morning, went slack. He stared at the number, then his head snapped up and his eyes locked on mine. The look in his eyes was something I will never forget. It wasn't just shock. It was a complete and total system failure. It was the look of a man whose entire understanding of the universe had just been shattered. The woman he had dismissed, belittled, and erased was not a pathetic dependent. She was a titan. And he had never, ever seen her. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the cheap carpet. The judge, an astute woman in her 60s, looked over her glasses at the scene. She saw Nathan's face, his lawyer's horrified expression, and my own quiet calm. "It appears," she said dryly, "that we may need a brief recess." 15 minutes. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that sounded like a gunshot. It was the starting gun for the rest of my life. I walked out of the courtroom and headed for the water fountain. My legs felt a little shaky, but I was steady. The storm had passed. Nathan caught up to me in the hallway, grabbing my elbow. His touch was clammy. "Sophie," he rasped, his voice unrecognizable. "What the hell was that? SVN Studio? 25 million? How is that possible? You were taking a pottery class." I looked down at his hand on my arm until he let go. "I was busy, Nathan." "Busy?" he nearly shrieked, his voice echoing in the marble corridor. He was starting to draw attention. "Sophie, we have to stop this. Retract that filing. We can work this out." I didn't know. "You have to understand. If you had just told me." He was starting to regain some of his footing, the gears of manipulation beginning to turn. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice, trying to sound reasonable. "Think about this. Think of the story. The tech mogul and the fashion queen. We could be an untouchable power couple. We can merge our assets. Think of what we could build together." He was looking at me with a terrifying hunger. The same hunger he'd had for my inheritance, for my marketing ideas. Now he was hungry for my empire. "There is no we," I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice water. He switched tactics. The wheedling manipulator was replaced by the gaslighting husband. "Don't be so emotional, Sophie. You're just angry about the other thing. I get it. I messed up. But don't let that cloud your business judgment. This is a huge opportunity for us." "For you, you mean," I corrected him. "An opportunity to claim credit for this, too? To tell everyone how your guidance helped your little wife build her hobby into a real business?" His face flushed. He knew I had him. He tried one last, desperate ploy, feigned remorse. He softened his expression, trying to look wounded. "Soph. I miss us. The way we were. Before all this. I made a mistake. I was stressed, I was an idiot. But I never stopped loving you." It was the most pathetic, transparent lie I had ever heard. And it was the final nail in the coffin. I took a step forward, forcing him to take a step back. "Let me be perfectly clear, Nathan," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You don't miss us. You miss the woman who proofread your emails at 2 a.m. You miss the woman who gave up her dreams so you could live yours. You miss the woman who was just around to stroke your ego and organize your life. That woman is dead. I can assure you, she is not coming back. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a future to attend to." I walked away, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the hallway, a king standing in the ruins of a kingdom he never realized was built on sand. 1 year later, I was in a glass-walled boardroom in Paris, the Eiffel Tower visible out the window. I was with the executive team of the conglomerate that had tried to buy my company. After weeks of intense negotiation, where I had argued for every percentage point, every clause protecting my creative independence, we had signed a historic partnership deal. They got access to my brand, I got access to their global infrastructure. It was a deal of equals. I had become fluent in the language of contracts and valuations, a language I never thought I'd need to know. After the signing, my phone buzzed. It was a Google alert for Nathan's name. A new article in a major business publication. The headline was brutal: "The Blind Spot, How Horizon Tech CEO Missed a $25 million Empire in His Own Home." The article wasn't just about our divorce. It was a dissection of his leadership style, his arrogance, his failure to see the value right in front of him. It detailed how several of his top female executives had resigned in the wake of the news, citing a toxic culture. His company wasn't bankrupt, but his reputation was. He was a laughingstock, a meme in the business world, a cautionary tale taught in MBA classes. I read the headline, and then I deleted the alert. His story was no longer my concern. I felt a quiet, profound sense of peace. My victory wasn't in his failure. It was in my own success, on my own terms. Later that evening, I met Clara for a celebratory glass of champagne at a rooftop bar. The city glittered below us like a carpet of diamonds. "To SVN Studio," she said, raising her glass. "No," I said, clinking my glass against hers. "To Sophie Vance." We both smiled. Standing on that rooftop, the cool Parisian air on my face, I finally understood. The entire ordeal, all the pain and betrayal, hadn't been a punishment. It had been a crucible. It had burned away the person I thought I was supposed to be, and left behind the person I truly was. I had to be erased by him to finally write my own name. I had to lose everything to gain myself. My phone buzzed again. A notification from my website. Another order. Another woman somewhere in the world who would wear one of my designs. Another small connection in this big, beautiful world. I opened the sketchbook I now carried with me everywhere. The page was blank. The possibilities were endless. And with a steady hand, I began to draw. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long and difficult road, but I'm so grateful for where I am today. It really makes me wonder about the turning points in all of our lives. So, my question for you is, have you ever had a moment or a crisis that forced you to discover a strength you never knew you had? I would be honored to read your stories in the comments below. And if you found any part of my journey inspiring, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world. Thank you again for being here.